Hello everybody. Hello. This is your video about the heart and basically your page on your lab manual for the heart and everything involved with it. So we know the heart here is found in the mediastinal cavity or mediastinum of your body, and it has its own little body cavity around it called the pericardial cavity. It has an outer covering to it that you can't see on the model called the pericardial sac. The base of the heart is generally, if I were to tie a string around here to hold up the heart from these auricles here, that would be considered where the base is. And then the tip of the heart at the bottom is the apex of the heart. Right? If we open the heart up, let's open up our ventricles first. Right, we can see different tissue layers. We can see that there is an outer layer, an outer covering, a middle muscular layer, and then a soft inner tissue layer that's super smooth where the blood will not stick as it's flowing through. These layers are called the inside layer of tissue where blood touches and doesn't stick is called the endothelium, right? Or the endocardium. So endo is inside, cardium is heart. So endocardium. This middle layer of tissue here is the muscular layer, which is called your myocardium. And then this outer tissue here, the outer covering of the heart that's like the heart's skin that protects it, that is called the epicardium. So the epicardium is the outer covering of the heart, right? Your pericardium is also the outside covering of your heart. Right? So let's go over the ins and outs of our heart here. Right? We know we have 4 chambers of the heart. The top 2 are called atria, and the bottom 2 are called ventricles. Your atria, the top ones, are covered by these little fatty-looking skin flaps or coverings because they are protected. They have the same name that the outside part of your ear has. It's called an auricle. So this entire flap that I can take off to show you the atria is literally the auricle of this atria. Right? Your other atria opens from the backside. Actually, there's no point in me opening that one, so I'm just going to leave that atria closed. Right? So that means you have a right atrium here and a left atrium here. Your atria receive the blood from your body or your lungs, wherever it's coming from. And your atria on the inside have these itty-bitty little speed bump ridges covering it. Even on the inside of the auricle, you can see them, all these little speed bump ridges here. Those tiny little ridges are called pectinate muscles. So those are called pectinate muscles. Right? And if you check out the inside of your atria, there's this little oval indentation right there. You can see it on both sides of the atria. This is the last part of your heart that forms during the 2nd trimester of pregnancy when your heart begins to form. And this is a common fetal birth defect, which is why it has its own special name, because if that does not close, you literally have a hole in your heart that goes from your left to your right atria. That little oval right there is called the fossa ovalis. The fossa ovalis. Other than that, the stuff you need to know around the top of the heart here, right? You need to know that feeding into your right atrium, you have blood from the rest of your body, which is coming from the superior vena cava, which is all the blood from above your heart is dumping in there. And then if we turn around, you can still see the superior vena cava here, but there's a hole right here where my thumb is going. That is where the inferior vena cava dumps back into this right atrium, right? So those are your superior and inferior vena cavas. If we flip around to the back of the heart, as well. You have this big fat vein that is dumping into your inferior vena cava, number 10 right here. That is your coronary sinus. You also, going into the left atrium, have these two veins, which are the only red veins on any model in your body because they are carrying oxygenated blood, which is weird for veins. Veins go to the heart, arteries go away from the heart, right? But these veins are carrying blood from the lungs back to the heart to be pumped everywhere else. So these pulmonary veins that are going into the left atrium are the only red veins in your body that can and will be used as a trick question, right? So these are your pulmonary veins. And then you have a nice little ligament right here, right? That kind of holds everything in place and makes sure things doesn't get tied in knots between your aortic arch and your pulmonary arteries here, which, by the way, this pulmonary trunk and the pulmonary arteries, these are the only arteries in your body that are blue on any models, because while most arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart, these arteries are the pulmonary arteries carrying blood to your lungs on the side to get oxygen. So blood is still flowing away from the heart, it's just not oxygenated, so the color is blue, right? This little white bit here is a ligament that is holding these in place. That ligament has one of two names. It can either be called your ductus arteriosus or your ligamentum arteriosum, whichever one of those that you would like to call it, I am fine with. Right? Flipping now to the lower chambers. The lower chambers of your heart are called ventricles. You have the right ventricle, which is smaller and just needs to pump blood next door to the lungs. And then you have the left ventricle here, which is larger and has more muscle mass around it, which has to pump the blood all the way around your body, including to your toes. So left ventricle has more muscle. The space between them, you have a wall of muscle here called the interventricular septum. Right? And just like your pectinate muscles for your atria, you also have a bunch of these ridges and internal little muscles in your heart. But they are larger in your ventricles. They're like hills and valleys instead of tiny little ridges. So they have a different name. They are called trabeculae carnae. And also, on top of these, you have valves in your heart that have tiny little strings to help them not backwash or prolapse. These heart strings, called chordae tendineae, attach to muscles here that are labeled A and C. Like these ones came down and attached there. Called papillary muscles that help control when these valves open and close. Right? Your right ventricle here pumps blood into the pulmonary trunk, which then flows to these pulmonary arteries. Your left ventricle that has to get blood to the rest of your body pumps blood directly into your aorta here. So this is your aorta. It's the biggest artery that's in your body. It's broken up into different areas. So you have the ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and then others going down. We'll talk about those in other videos. You also have valves that prevent backflow through your heart and your body. So the valve right here, connected to your pulmonary trunk, this is your pulmonary valve. If we look at the same thing on the inside, you have a valve back here attached to your aorta. That is your aortic valve. Right? This is the tricuspid valve. You can count that it has 3 little cusps on it if you're looking. So 1, 2, 3. That is your tricuspid valve on the right side, separating atrium and ventricle. Bicuspid is right here, separating left atria and ventricle. It only has 2 cusps. That one is your bicuspid or mitral valve on that side. And those are the 4 valves of your heart that prevent backflow, right? So if we are attempting to trace blood flow through the heart, right, it's 12 to 14 step process. It comes into the heart through either the superior vena cava above the heart or inferior vena cava below the heart into the right atrium, then flows through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, flows through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary trunk, and then pulmonary arteries going to the right and left lungs, then comes back to the heart through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium, flows through the mitral or bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, which then passes through the aortic valve into the aorta, and then goes to the rest of the body from there. So that is your cycle or circle of blood flow. I'm going to close up the heart really fast. I need both hands for this. The only other things y'all needed to know are the actual arteries and veins on the heart, and there's only 4 of each that you need to know. Right? So branching directly off of your aorta here is blood that feeds your heart. You have the right coronary artery that flows onto the right here underneath your right atria, and then along the side of your heart, it's going to branch off, because every time arteries and veins branch, they change names just like roads. And this ends up becoming your right marginal artery. So your right coronary artery turns into your right marginal artery. On the flip side of things, you have a left coronary artery that would go behind your pulmonary trunk here. You see the very end of it where it branches off, and it branches into your circumflex artery that is continuing to loop around the heart here. And then this big old artery that goes down the middle of your heart in the front. This is your anterior interventricular artery. So anterior is front, interventricular is between your ventricles, and then artery because it's an artery. So anterior interventricular artery. You also, if we flip the heart over, have a posterior interventricular artery. That leads us to the veins that are coming out of your heart. They are slightly easier to name. We've already learned that this big old fat vein here is your coronary sinus. And as we're turning the heart around on the back, you see that there is a big one looping all the way around, a middle one, and then a small one on the right-hand side, right? These are literally named the great cardiac vein that is looping around, right? So great cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein because it's the one in the middle, small cardiac vein. So your veins are slightly easier. Big old fat one here is the coronary sinus, and then you have great, middle, small for cardiac veins. But that is your heart's blood flow and pointing things out on the heart. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Have a wonderful night.